Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Combined Machine and Manpower-Related Scheduling with Finite Capacity with Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central. My name is Martin Karlovic. I'm CEO and one of the owners of Netronic Software from Germany, and I'm the host for today's webinar. So this webinar follows a frequently asked questions that we usually get, and this is that we face customers or meet partners who have customers who not only need to schedule machines, but also have like a labor-centric part of the work. And then they always ask like how to do this best, how to set this up best, how to build this in Business Central, how to set this up. And I thought to turn this webinar into to turn this FAQ, this frequently asked question, into a webinar. But before I go to this frequently asked question, I actually want to answer the most frequently asked question first, and this is yes, this webinar will be recorded. We will share the recording on our YouTube channel. It will be online on the YouTube channel tonight, maybe tomorrow, and then available also on our website under webinar recordings, maybe tomorrow or day after tomorrow. So we try to get this on the YouTube channel as soon as possible, and then afterwards also embedded into our website. So yes, it will be recorded and the recording will be available publicly. As this is a webinar, you're all on mute. If you have a question, please use the GoToWebinar chat pane. When I'm on demos, then I won't most likely see that you have a question, then I will answer it after the demo or at the end of the meeting. So every question that has to do with this topic will get answered. So please feel free to ask questions. It's always better for me as a presenter if I get challenged and if I get questions. So really looking forward to your contribution to this webinar as well. So before we jump into the topic, I started with this slide, I think with the last webinar, with one of the last webinars, that I try to put the webinars into perspective, because we have webinars that are meant for beginners. We have webinars that are more for people who know us and our products better. And sometimes I focus on features and functions, and sometimes I talk about or try to talk more about business processes and best practices. So today we're talking about a how-to question, which is a bit more for those guys who know us better, a bit more for those guys who are more familiar with our product. So if you haven't heard about the VAPS, the Visual Advanced Production Scheduler, before, then you may see some things that you won't necessarily understand the first time, but still I encourage you to stay in the meeting to kind of follow my thoughts and my explanations. And then if there are things that are unclear, then ask them during the meeting or ask them afterwards. Send me an email. I will share my contact details at the end of the session. So then hang in here, but don't expect today that I will explain everything from the very beginning. But I made the assumption when I prepared the webinar that you have a general good understanding of what the VAPS, the Visual Advanced Production Scheduler for Business Central, is. And I will also drill not down into single features and function, but more talk about like how can we solve a specific case. And the specific case is how can we schedule with finite capacity a production where I need to combine machine work with, how I call it, manpower-related work. And before I give an answer to this question, I have to do some expectation setting, and expectation setting, of course, always means there is some good news and there is some bad news. And good news and bad news come from the fact that when I get in a situation where customers or partners ask me like, okay, I got the part, how you schedule against finite capacity for all those machines or for all those machines, but what do you do with people? Then this question always makes me curious, and then I try to drill down into the use case and try to understand the case and the requirement better, because at least there are two different types of flavors where manufacturers need to or two kind of different cases where manufacturers need to schedule both like machine work and manpower related work. And the first case to look at is that customers need to make sure that they utilize a machine and an operator at the same point of time. So they have a machine and an operator, and ideally they want to put it on a single operation. So they say, for this type of process, I need to have this machine, whatever, I need to have this CNC machine, but it cannot run alone. It needs to have an operator, and the operator needs to be there either for setting up the machine, or the operator needs to be there during the entire runtime of the machine. And then the second case is that we actually have a production flow that has some where parts of the production flow are very machine centric. So where we have what I would call the machine operations. And typically most of the customers that I meet, then this is the first part. So it's a machining, it's a fabrication type of process where you have whatever type of machine shop within the customer, where you do some CNC work, we do some milling, some kind of turning, and all of these typical SMB manufacturer machining work. And then once this is done, most likely in most of the cases, then we will have some manual operations. There might be some assembly work, or there might be some welding work, or there might be some welding first and then some assembly, and afterwards some quality control and some packing and things like this. So first, whatever you build parts, you build proprietary parts with your own machines. Sometimes you put them on stock, and then you take the parts that you produced on your own machine, and then you assembled them to a product, or you weld them first, and then you assembled them, and then you inspect them, and then you pack them and ship them. So we have those, and those cases are very different, and they both have to do with like scheduling machine and labor, scheduling machines and people. In the one case, we need to make sure that we have both type of resources available at the same time, and in the other, we need to make sure we schedule the machine first, and then we schedule the people. And typically we want to schedule the machines differently than we schedule the people. And in terms of expectation setting, in terms of bad news, good news is like the first case, having two, let's say, resources, like a machine and a person at the same point of time on one operation, on one production or rotating line, is something that Business Central does not support. And it is also something where I currently say, hey, we do not support this with the VAPS. It is on our idea list for next year that we will start looking into this case. I know that this creates a lot of additional challenges for the scheduler we built. So it is not a lightweight development task, but we have it on the list of ideas for next year. So we will look into this. I'm not committing that we will build this, but we will look into this because we see this case frequently. Currently, like this is something that Business Central struggles with, and also that we not support with the VAPS, let's say, yet. If I have this case, I recommend customers, or I work with customers to find out what actually the bottleneck is. Is it the machine, or is it the person? And then sometimes you can work around that. You say, okay, if the person is the bottleneck, because I have the machine all the time, but I can only operate it when I have the person available, then I actually recommend not to set up the machine as machine centers, but the person as machine centers, and then use their capacity to schedule it. So there are some workarounds here. They are not ideal, but you can cope with this. But the latter case here, this is something that, of course, you can also build or you can model with Business Central. And this is something that we fully support with the VAPS. And so the rest of the webinar, I will talk about this second case, the second case where you have like the combination of machine-centric operation on the one hand and manpower-related operation on the other hand. And I will look into this case and what we found out, what we recommend to our clients and to our partners, how to set this up and how to deal with this case. So now that you know what I was talking about, so if you came to this webinar because you're expecting a solution to this, well, sorry, hopefully next year I will run a webinar again with the same or similar topic that I can talk about this a little bit more, but now I will focus and will concentrate on this use case. And so let's discuss actually the second case. And the typical phase that I actually see with a lot of our customers is that they have this machining fabrication phases and then the manual work phases. And in machining and fabrication, of course, we have discrete machines. Each machine typically has a capacity of one, so each machine can work on one production order or one production or routing line at the time. And typically customers have like sets of different machines for different type of work. So they have a bunch of CNC machines. They have a bunch of gear cutting machines. They have a bunch of turning machines, a bunch of saws, and so on and so forth. And they really need to schedule them against the capacity of one, making sure that they don't overload them and assigning one production order routing line at a time to those machines. Whereas like the manual work case is a little bit different. So typically this is not organized on, and also the production flow is not organized by the machines and by like sets of machines where every machine producing one piece at a time, but typically they have different work sets, and the work sets are, again, they might be organized by the type of work that is done. So there might be the work cell assembly one, there might be another like assembly line or assembly work cell, there might be like a packing station with a couple of people working there, and there might be the quality control area with a couple of inspection places as well. And so typically what people do is they just assign, or they just define the capacity of the work set. So they say, okay, in welding we have 8 welders, and then they know that to this work cell welding where they have these 8 welders, they can assign 8 production order routing lines at the time, right? So and they balance it out by saying, okay, this is the daily capacity that these 8 guys can do, and here is the work we give them, and they make sure how they sort it out. And then they have like following the work cell welding where they have the 8 people, they have assembly line 1 where they have like 5 people working, so they know that they can give at one time maximum 5 production orders or 5 production order routing lines to this assembly line. Or they say, okay, I have this one piece of work that I give there, and then I use the concurrent capacity functionality and set it to 5 so that all the 5 workers in this work cell work on this assembly order at the same point of time. And also in these cases, I typically observe a certain degree of flexibility to move workers from one work cell to the other. So they say, okay, I typically have 8 welders and 5 guys in this assembly line, but sometimes one of the welders might be idle, and then I can also send him to help out with a large assembly job so that I can move them, whatever, for the next week from the one work cell to the other, so that I can like level out a little bit like excess capacity requirement in the one work cell. So this is typically how a lot of customers actually describe how like the manufacturing in these areas work. In the one area, very discrete, very to the machine, very clear, very precise. In the other, much more to the work cell, to an aggregated capacity, being dependent on the number of people working there, with more flexibility, also with the flexibility to say, okay, this is like the long job. I don't want to have one person working on it. I want to have 3 persons working on it. So I set the concurrent capacity to 3. So these are the things that are happening there. And so in the first case, of course, when it comes to scheduling, the work needs to get scheduled to the machine, right? And also the work needs to get posted to the machine. So I need to schedule to the machine, and I need to say in advance, okay, I schedule this production order to my CNC 5, and then it goes to my saw 1, and afterwards it goes to my turning machine 3. And if you run the if you run the job on that machines, then it also needs to get posted there. It cannot just get posted to the sawing work center or to the to the CNC work center, but it needs to get posted to the machine, because we might have different cost factors there, and we also need to make some calculate statistics how the machines, the respective machines were utilized over a point of time. With the work where we have more the manpower related work, where the work is more manual, this is also different, because in a lot of cases actually the work just needs to get scheduled to the work site. So we say, okay, this job goes to welding, or this job goes to assembly one, and then we know, okay, in welding we have 8 people, in assembly one we have 5 people, and then whatever the team lead or the foreman figures out what to do and who is going to work on which job when. However, oftentimes what is sufficient for scheduling is not sufficient for posting. So it's not sufficient for tracking actuals. So oftentimes then the worker needs to get posted, or the work needs to get posted to the worker. So if we assign the production order like to the work center or the work cell welding, then it sits there for scheduling welding, and we can track the capacity load and figure out, okay, the welding, the work we schedule to welding can get done by this group, by this team, by this work cell at that day. But then if the work actually starts, we want that Peter or Paul or Mary or John, who are my welders, that they actually post on the job, because in the end, what many customers want to do and need to do is they need to kind of compare and assess and measure the performance of the worker. So they can say, okay, whatever, this person had output X, the other person had output X minus a little bit percent. And then they can work with them and compare what the one is doing better than the other and why it's more efficient, or then they figure out whatever, that the one person does more cigarette breaks or breakfast breaks or whatever than the other. So, and this happens, and hence, although we schedule, let's take in quotes, to the work cell or to the work center, we need actually to post the work oftentimes to the worker. And if we have cases like this, here is typically, when I come across these cases, or when we come across this case, what we recommend to our partners and what we recommend to our customers, how to set this up. So first of all, in Business Central, for the machining part, for the fabrication part, if it is as I described it right now, then definitively set up each machine as a machine center, right? And then the capacity is 1, and the efficiency, put it as you need it. If the efficiency is 100, put it to 100. If you think, okay, maybe we only get whatever, if we have 10 hours a day, and if you know that on average you have 2 hours of machine standstill for whatever reason, because people do breaks, or because of whatever, some daily maintenance that needs to happen, then put the efficiency to 8%, whatever. And you can set this up as you want, because the VAPS takes into account the capacity and the efficiency anyway, with the latest release that we published a month ago. And then typically we recommend that you bundle similar machines into work center, so that, for example, if you have a bunch of CNC machines, then you create a work center CNC, and then you put all your CNC machines into this work center, because then this makes it easier for you kind of to track the work that you schedule to all those CNC machines visually when you work with a tool like the VPS or a VAPS. And of course, in this case, you define the routing that it goes to the machine center. You define in advance, okay, this goes to my CNC 5, or this goes to my SAW 1 or whatever. And then also the posting goes to the machine center. So you're very granular here overall, right? You set up every machine as machine center. You set up the capacity there to 1. You give it the shop calendar, the efficiency as needed, and then everything like routing and the posting, they go to the machine center. So quite granular here. With the manual work, I also recommend, I will come to this later, why I recommend to set up each worker as a machine center. So you would set up Peter, Paul, John, and whatever, who are your welders. You would set them up with a capacity of 1 as well, and with the efficiency as needed. And then you bundle the similar workers into work center. So like all welders, they would go to the work center welding, and all people who on average work in the assembly team 1, for example, go to the work center assembly 1. And then what I recommend is that for those work centers, for those welding work centers, for those assembly work centers, you switch on the consolidated calendar, so that actually the capacity of the work center in Business Central is derived from the calendars of the underlying work center. This will help you then, and I will come to this later in the course of the webinar, to deal with deviations. So if people are sick, if people are on vacation or whatever, then if you work with a consolidated calendar on the work center, it pulls the calendars from the machine centers, and then you can handle worker absences through their machine center absences. In that case, where you just assign the work to the work cell, you just say this job should go to the welding and this job to assembly 1 and this to assembly 2, then the routing typically goes to the work center, whereas I recommend to do the posting still on the machine center. So you schedule it to the work center, you leave it there, and then from the schedule, you just manage the work center's capacity. But if it goes to the shop floor, and if you have a shop floor app, for example, then this work shows up on all terminals of all welders, and then Peter can pick the work he starts on, and John can start and can pick the work he starts to work on, and then they post it on it. And then with the posting and the capacity ledger entries, you actually also track who worked on which part, and yes, Business Central supports this. When it comes to the VAPS, definitively, if you have complementary machines, so for example, if you have 2 CNC machines and they can do the same kind of work, then we definitively recommend that you work with the alternate routing sets that are part of the VAPS functionality, and that I will show you in a minute. So this is something that we definitively encourage you to use here in this case. And in the other case, with the manual work, we also recommend that you use alternate routing sets if you have complementary teams. So for example, if you have 2 assembly teams and in general, you define that this work should go to assembly 1, but you know that like if assembly 1 is over capacity, then we can go give it to the other assembly team. So then do this as well. And then what we recommend here is, because actually you have set up each worker as a machine center, but you will never schedule work to it. So we then recommend that you build, for example, a base view filter so that you do not see the workers in the schedule. When you do scheduling, and the VAPS is meant for scheduling, and we talk about how to finite capacity schedule a case where we have, like, for example, fabrication first and then manpower related work afterwards. If you talk about scheduling, then the VAPS is the tool of choice. And then in the VAPS, in the scheduling tool, we don't necessarily need to see the workers when we do the scheduling. And so I recommend that you definitively have these type of filters here, so that you can deal with this. And with this, let's go to the VAPS first, and let's look actually at a couple of those settings. So now I'm switching the environment, have to go to let's log in again, and then we see what I have here. So maybe we start actually. Let's start from here. Let's start really high level. Let's start from my work center groups. I, in my case, have like 4 major work center groups. I have a production area, I have assembly area, finishing area, and then I have subcontracting, and then I combine everything that I found in the Kronos database in a work center that I just filtered out, or in a work center group that I just filtered out in the VAPS. Then when it comes to the work centers, in production, and these are the Kronos, so they typically start with W, so my work center 10 is turning, then sawing, gear cutting, milling. This is all in production, right? Then in the work center group assembly, I have 2 work centers, and then the assembly team 1 and 2, and then I have a work center quality control as part of my finishing work center group. And if we look at here, like in turning, the work centers are set up to 1. I have the consolidated calendar switch on, but it also wouldn't matter if I have it switched off, because I would schedule to the machine anyway. In assembly, I set up the capacity to 1, but I switched on the consolidated calendar, so it actually will pull the calendars of all machine centers that I put under the assembly team. So if we look at my machine centers, we actually see like in turning in my first work center, I have 4 machines. I have a CTX 400, CTX 2500, and so on. And I set up my machine. So for my machining part, with a capacity of 1, efficiency of 100% here in this time, because like my shop is running at full steam and with no coffee breaks, no cigarette breaks. So a very disciplined guy is running the shop here. Anyway, and then on the work center, I had the shop calendar that is then inherited to machine centers. And then you see I also have, and these are my machine centers, they start with M, and then I have machine centers, they actually start with WO, and these are my workers. And then you see that for my assembly team 1, I have, for that, I have 4 workers. I have Paul, Greg, John, and Joe. And so these 4 workers, they are put into the work center 40, which is assembly team 1. And as the assembly team 1 has a consolidated calendar, it now can like handle up to 4 production orders a day. So this is how I set up my capacity. If we then look at just one sample routing, how I set this up for like a random product. In my case, it goes to machining. So here in this case, it goes to turning, gear cutting, and then it goes to assembly and quality control. I set it up in a way that the first step, which are in the machining part, they go to the machine center. I specify this should go to the CTX 400 and then to the LC 500. And then when it comes to the manual work, I have the routing on the work center level, and I just say this is assembly team and this is to the quality control team. And if appropriate, I think I don't have it here. If appropriate, I could also specify concurrent capacity that I would say, okay, for this item here, I actually always want to have 2 people in the assembly team working on it. I think I have examples here. Let me see. Sorry for that, bad preparation. Like here, you see it goes to the saw, then it goes to the Wagner BAZ, which is a milling machine. It goes to assembly 2, and I say, okay, I need to work, I have to need 2 people working on it. So concurrent capacity of 2. But overall, this is, and you see, I have the same principles here for a lot of my routings. Whenever it goes to the machine-centric part of my shop, I put into the routing the machine center, the very concrete machine. Whenever it goes to the manual work, I just assigned it to the work center. Then you see actually here, like for example, this is the milling. This is a milling, the Wagner BAZ is a milling machine. And then you see this new column here. This is a column that comes from the VAPS, and it allows me to define alternative machines. So I have a couple of milling machines, and here in this case, if I click here and then I look what milling factor says, then I say, okay, I defined an alternate routing set, and this is part of the VAPS setting. So this is new metadata that you can define with the VAPS. I have a definition here that I call milling factor, and the description is Wagner faster than brother, where I say, okay, I might have items where I actually can use both of these milling machines. I can use the Wagner BAZ and the TC229 brother, but the brother, like maybe this is the older machine, I'm a little bit faster in setting it up, but I run the machine much slower. So I run it 40% slower. So I get more output in a given period of time on the Wagner, but there might be cases that this machine still is preferable because if this machine is quite busy, I have a lot of idle time here, then although the machine runs slower, I could potentially finish some production orders earlier if I move it to the less efficient machine, because the less efficient machine has more free capacity. So this is definitely a recommended setting for the machining part. If you have complementary machines, if you have items like in my case that you mill and where you can use either the Wagner machine or the brother machine, then put this take the time to define these alternate routing sets, put them to the routing in the line alternate routing set, because then we take them into account when scheduling, and then we definitely help you to much more efficiently schedule like the machine shop that you have, the machiner part. And the same also applies if you have these work sets. And in my case, you saw I have two assembly teams. I have assembly team 1 and 2, and by general production or product 13 should go to assembly team 1. But if assembly team 1 is busy and assembly team 2 has free capacity, then I want to go into the team 2. So I also have an alternate routing set here that I call like assembly all. And if we look at how I defined this set, this assembly all is that I say, actually, I don't care if it goes to assembly team 1 or assembly team 2, they are equal. It takes the same time for them to be set up for this item. It takes them the same time to work on that item. So if I define it like this, then the VAPS will assign the work to that work center that has the capacity available at earliest. So you can define these alternate routing sets, both on a machine center level and on a work center level. And if you have complementary teams, then do this on the work center level. If you have complementary machines, then do this on the machine center level. I see that there's a question, so I will quickly look at the question. The question is, when using alternate routing set, is it possible to use more alternates than one? Yes, absolutely. So these were two examples that I just picked. But if you go actually to the VAPS, to my alternate routings, here are my alternate routing sets. So for example, in gear cutting all, I have put in 3 machines. But if you have like 5 or 6 or 10 or 15 machines that you can use, then you could put them all here. I think I have 4 milling machines. Milling here, I also 3. I have 4 turning machines. I think these are 4. So you can put in more than just one alternative in the alternate routing set. So this is not limited here at all, to my knowledge. So hope that this answered your question. So now that we saw how I set this up, then actually look at my schedule graphically and look how you can schedule in this case. And I created already a simulation. So a simulation is a copy of your production orders that we put together, and where you, with the VAPS, you schedule on this simulation data, because you want to kind of differentiate the scheduling from the execution. And then when you, as the production scheduler, are happy with the work you did on your schedule, then you can publish the simulation, and then we write the data back to Business Central. Next question: does the alternate routing going to be associated only in VAPS, or does it do something in the production order routing as well in Business Central? So first of all, the alternate routing is a function. The alternate routing set is a functionality that is implemented with the installation of the VAPS. So it is part of the VAPS functionality. The alternate routing set first gives you a new table that you just saw, where you can define typical sets of alternate routings. Then it enhances the way of how you define your routing. So if you define a routing, as you saw, you can add the alternate routing set. Then when you create a production order, the production order not only knows the default machine that it goes to, but then the production order also knows the allowed alternatives. Hence, the VAPS knows the allowed alternatives. So then if you start working with the VAPS, which I will do here, and then if you schedule your new production orders and utilize also the alternate routing sets, then the VAPS will allocate the work to those machine centers and work centers that are available at earliest. And then when you publish, we will definitively update the production orders in Business Central, and then the new work center or the new machine center to which you published it will get saved and written back into Business Central. If you have more questions on the alternate routing sets, then I recommend that we schedule a separate meeting, because the webinar today is not about alternate routing sets, but It is about talking about the combined scheduling of machine-centric and labor-centric work. So now we look at my schedule graphically. I have my production area, I have my assembly area, I have my finishing area. In assembly, I have these two work centers, and where you see I have the resources, so the workers that I sent in production. You see my work centers like turning, sawing, gear cutting, milling, and then you see the machines. And here in my labor-centric part of the factory or of my shop, you see I assigned all production or most production orders to those machines. Whereas if I scroll down, you actually see that I assigned all the work to assembly team 1, and I didn't assign work particularly to those people, because we said we don't want to schedule to the people, right? We just want to schedule to the assembly team. So actually what I should do is, when I create the simulation, I should tell and I should filter out all those workers that I do not to see in the visual schedule, because let's go there again, they just make visual noise, right? If we go to assembly, we see all those assembly workers, but those assembly workers by in general, they are not relevant for me, because I do not need to schedule work to Paul, to Greg, to John, to Joe, to Peter, to Hans, to Raj, to Mick, to Linda, and so on, because I want to schedule to the work center, not to the individual people. So they are just make like a visual noise, and it's a little bit distracting. So actually, when I create a simulation, I defined a base view filter that I say show all but no worker. And if you just want to see what I did here, if we go and look at the filter, then I just filter and say the machine center should be not equal to starting WO, because WO, this was how all my machine center numbers for this worker started. And so if I do this, if I apply this filter, create quickly a new simulation and open it again, then we will actually see the schedule. We see the schedule in a way that I want to have it. I have in the top area, in the upper area, I have my machining work centers with all the machines, and then down here I just see the work cells for assembly and for quality control, but I don't see the workers. But you see that here we schedule always with a capacity of 1, whereas here, like an assembly team, there's the consolidated calendar, and as there were 4 workers, I have overall a capacity of 4, and this means we take this into account. So now you see here on standby, there are a bunch of new jobs actually waiting to get scheduled, and I can then, let's say schedule and say add all, and then I can add them efficiently to my schedule without disturbing the schedule, but keeping like taking into account the capacity that I have. So we see I don't overload the machine. Every machine just has a capacity of 1, so one production order at a time. Whereas here I assigned maximum 4 production orders a day to the assembly team. Here 3 because I only have 3 workers, and here again 4 because I have 4 people in quality control. So that way I can really efficiently schedule on the one hand the machining work, and on the other hand, the people's work here. So with this is how I would set it up and how I would utilize this in Business Central. So then the next question is, and I actually need to see that I need to speed up a little bit, but the next question is, how should I deal with changing capacity? So what happens? What should I do? Like if a machine breaks down, or if I have a planned maintenance on a machine center, or then how should I do with this? Or what should I do is if I know that a person will go on vacation, so how should I define this? So let's talk about how to deal with downtime and uptime. In this case, we just described. Well, in the machining part, I recommend that you define the downtime via the VAPS, so that you do with the right clicks, context menu on the calendar, and then you define additional downtime. Of course, you can also register absence on the machine center, but it's a little bit more cumbersome from the handling. And the other thing is, if you do it from the VAPS, we get hold of it, and then we can kind of publish, or we can populate this absence into all the other simulations. If you do it from Business Central, you have to create a new simulation so that we get hold of the changes that you do. With the manual work, and if you define team absence, and we need to differentiate, is the whole, or will the whole team be absent? Then on the work center, you can do this with a right click. If you want to define absence of the worker, then you first need to remove the filter that blends out the workers, and then via right click menu on the machine center, you actually can also define absence for the worker, or you do it via the machine center absence. And with uptime, it's exactly the same, no, the other way around. So if you want to define additional work time on the machine, on the machines, you do this preferably, and this is the recommended way, via the VAPS, right-click context menu on the calendar, and then we take this into account if you schedule. And if you do the manual work, similar as above, but now with additional work. If you want to define additional work time for individual workers, if you do it via a Business Central, it works via the machine center capacity entries, and this is really not very easy to do, not very straightforward. So we really recommend to do this via the VAPS. And I also want to quickly show you how you can do this. So let me go back to my demo first. So first of all, let's start with defining some machine downtime. So maybe I'll take an easy example. Maybe we have this case here. We have this case here, and my production people tell me that on the 27th of February, my saw will be on a planned maintenance. And you see currently I have some work scheduled it. So now let's see, how can we define the downtime and what happens? So first of all, I define additional downtime. So right-click context menu on the 27th, define additional downtime. And I can say, okay, planned maintenance, and this starts at 6 in the morning. Yeah, 6 in the morning, and and it's until the end of the shift, so until 11 p.m. So if I do this, the following happens. You see, I have now a red background here. If I hover the mouse over it, I see description planned maintenance, and the production order that would schedule to it now move back to the standby resource, because this is something I need to reschedule now because the machine is not available. So now I can think of, maybe I need to get this done earlier here, so I would need to accelerate the predecessor, or I can say, okay, then I put it to the schedule again the next day, because here I have planned maintenance on that machine. And likewise, you can do also if you want to accelerate things. So let me see if I find something where I can do a bit of acceleration. What maybe if you say, okay, the machine is here on maintenance, but I want, after the maintenance, we actually have to work on this during the night. So then I can say also define additional uptime. And then I do it likewise. I say, okay, on the 28th of January, we start at midnight and until whatever, 8 a.m. or 7 a.m. Let's do 8. I want to have the machine to work. And then if I do additional uptime, then we see calendar grid being gray, and then I can move the production order in here and utilize this additional time that I have now here. So this is something how you can define additional uptime and downtime, and this writes directly back into the machine center or work center absence table or the capacity entry. So if we look at the saw, and if we look to the absence, then there is a plant maintenance. So this is the entry that I did from the VAPS here. So this was on the machine case. When we look at the teams, at the manpower related work, we need to make a differentiation. So for example, if the entire team here, whatever, would go on a plant training, I right now could do it from here. So if I could, and I do it on the work center. So now if the team 2, whatever, will be on the training from the 11th to the 15th, I could do this, define additional downtime, and then I could say whatever, external training, and they would be whatever from, I don't know what is the calendar, they would start on the 11th and they would be away until the 15th. I think the end of their day is 4 or 5, I don't know. So then we would send the entire, and then we could not allocate any type of work to that machine, to that work center anymore. However, we can also have the case that whatever, just one worker is absent. So how would I do this? Because right now I cannot access them. Well, then you either would go to business center, to the worker, and define and remove the capacity there, or you could do it from the VAPS, but then you have to remove the filter. So let me do the latter first for the sake of the demo. So first of all, I published the simulation. Let me quickly publish it so that we get the changes saved. Then I will create a new simulation and remove the filter here so that I see all my workers again. And if I look at this, if I look at this again, like the changes I made before, they are still part of my schedule. The assembly team 2 here is on the plant training. And then let's look what happens if, for example, here I get the information that, I don't know, Paul Miller will be whatever, he will be off sick, whatever, from the 28th, or let me say from the 29th, from the 27th to the 1st of March, or maybe the whole week. He will be on vacation. Sick is always sad. So now I could go here, and then for Paul Miller, I can say define additional downtime. So Paul will be on vacation, of course, well deserved. Anyway, from the 26th in the morning, let's say from 8, and he will be gone by the 1st of March. I do this, and then we see, first of all, we see Paul is absent. So right now, no change because I made it here. But now what we recognize is when I expand on the assembly team, where we have the histogram, we all of a sudden see, hey, we have an overload here on these days, because now, like if I hover with the mouse here, we see we have a capacity of 4 and a load of 4. Here we have a capacity of 4, a load of 3. If I go here, I actually see we have a capacity of 3 because Paul Miller is on vacation in that week. So then an idea could be, okay, then whatever, I need to change things. I have free capacity here, so I move it to next week when I have free capacity, and then it's almost sorted out. Something is a little bit overlapping here as well, so then I can just move things left and right like I just did, and so then I can kind of balance this out again. So the idea here is that if you have if you have a downtime per the workers, then you can actually define, like I did it here on the machine, on the machine centers that are your workers. You can go here and define absence. Now you see that the thing that the absence that I defined here is also written down into those tables, and then I can see the impact on the VAPS. The thing is, if you want to have if you want to have the case, how we will do it later on. So if you want to increase capacity, then you would have to do it from here. You would need to go to the calendar, and if, for example, Paul should work longer on a particular day, then you would need to change this entry over here, which can be a little bit cumbersome. So if you want to work in whatever to 20 p.m. and have some overtime, significant overtime, then you would need to do it from here. It is feasible, but this could also be done better going forward. Last thing, of course, if you have something running, like we have this production order here that was what was scheduled to the assembly work center, and we see from the underscore it is already finished here in turning. It is work in progress in milling. So if it would be ready in milling, and then if it would be ready on assembly, then of course, as we said, it is scheduled to the work center. But of course, if you go here and do the posting, and let me just take the part that is on assembly, you could change this. And if in assembly Paul would be the one who did the job, then you could change it here and then post it to whoever is in assembly. You post it to Paul. So this is definitely the way of how I would do this. So I would always, with this labor-centric work, I would always post it, I would schedule it to the work center. I would also do not see the workers in the visual planner. I would only want to see them if I have to kind of model that they are absent or include some absency in there. But I would definitively post to the worker, because then I can do some nice reporting afterwards as to who accomplished which part of the work in which time, and how many parts per whatever shift, per day, per week, per month they finished. And this could be kind of useful statistics for me. So let's, before we wrap this up, actually go to another case. And this is the question how to deal with changing capacity. So flexibly assigning workers from one to the other work centers. This is something that also customers have, and this then also only applies like the area of the manual work. So I have no chart here for the machining and fabrication, because typically like changing capacity is that we have, okay, like in my case, I had the assembly team with 3 workers and the other with 4 workers. And then if the worker with the 4 workers would be overloaded, like we had right now because Paul was on vacation, then take somebody from the other team and send them there for the next week or whatever. And here is again a little bit of bad news, because this is not a very straightforward process in Business Central right now. What you would need, because you cannot have one machine center into work centers. Sorry, this is wrong. Into work centers, and now the format to work centers, because Business Central does not allow this. So you cannot have one machine center, 2 work centers. Business Central does not allow this, and also it would be a mess in the planning board, because imagine you would have Paul in assembly team 1, and then would also have Paul in assembly team 2, then where to show work that is assigned to him, where to show this. It would just be like, also would not provide a visually good experience. So then the thing that you need to do is, first, if, for example, we would send in 1 week Paul from assembly team 1 to assembly team 2, we would first need to remove the filter that blends out the workers, and then we would need to create the absence like we did. So then Paul would not be no longer available in team 1. And the next step is, as we cannot send Paul temporarily in Business Central in this assembly team 2, we would have to increase partly the the capacity of the team 2 in Business Central. So we would need to increase the capacity in the other work center. With the VAPS, this is currently not possible. And in Business Central, you would do this via the machine capacity entries, which is rather complex, especially if this should go to multiple days. Then you would need to go here. And then for all those days that are impacted on that work center here, you would need to change these values here, and this is very cumbersome. And it is possible, but it requires a bit of manual work and a bit of discipline. So if we sum this up, what I've shared with you, then combined machine and manpower-related scheduling with finite capacity is tricky, but it is definitively possible in the VAPS, although we do not yet support the case man-machine simultaneously. As I said, this is something we look at again next year. But the case I have a production process with both machine work and manual work, this is very well supported. And by the way, this is the case that we see really with a lot of our customers. So if you're a partner and if you're a customer who says, I need to schedule labor and machine, then please take the time, ask them what the use case is. Do they really need to schedule the operator and the machine at the same point of time? Or can they define what is the bottleneck and then make whatever is the bottleneck, make this the machine center? Or ask them like, okay, is it that you have parts of your shop where you schedule to the machines and then other parts where it is a little bit less granular and you schedule to the work cell? Then you definitively can use the VAPS I've shown you with the settings I also outlined here as we share in the recording later. And then in that case, you will run into the questions that I showed you. I showed you with how to change the capacity, how to add work time, how to remove work time, how to kind of take into account that the worker is sick, how to take into account that the worker will go on vacation, how can I move people from let's say, virtually move them from one work center to the other. And the good news is Business Central provides the right data to flexibly change work and machine center capacity, but like the dialogues to do so, they are not always straightforward. So this is something that we definitively will work on in 23. So next year, we will also look at making all these, let's say, capacity changes, adding capacity, removing capacity, adding temporary capacity here, removing temporary capacity here. We did, I think, a good first approach in the VAPS with the right context menu, but I would want us to make this better next year. And so this is something you will definitely see appearing on our roadmap of next year. It is not yet decided as to when we will do it, but we will definitely work on this. And with this, I hope I gave you an answer to how to schedule machine-centric and manpower-related work within one manufacturing company. And if you have any question, then you can ask them now. I see there is another question came. And this is a long one. Let me quickly have a look. Okay, for the future BC Netronic VAPS development, how to allocate a person's working time to a finite capacity if one is able to work on different works in the machine center when the production progresses from the routing phase to another, or even if one is able to work on several work center machine center at the same time. Again, this is something we will look in next year. We will specify, and then if we do a webinar on the same topic, maybe same point of time next year, I will definitely have an answer to this yet. Right now, we first look at supporting the case that you have like separated part of your shop where you on the one hand have like the machine-centric work, and on the other you have your manpower-related work. This is where we already have an answer, but whenever it gets combined. So whenever you have machines and then person, whatever, either operating a machine or traveling with a piece through the shop, this is something we need to think through. And after we thought through, then we need to specify, then we need to build this. And in the process of thinking it through and building it, I will definitely have a clear answer on this question. Right now, the answer I have to this question is we will think about this, and then once we thought about this, then we can give you a concrete answer to this. So I think you really phrased the challenge well. Challenge accepted, but there is some work for us to do there. So if you have no more question now, then I really like to thank you for spending time with me this afternoon or this morning, wherever you are. Thank you for your attention. And if you have a question afterwards, drop me an email. I will definitely answer that or point you to the right person from my team to help you with. If we are not yet connected, then please free to reach out on LinkedIn so that we also can share ideas right there. And with this, thank you very much. Take care and see you in one of our next webinars. I think one is scheduled for next week and then the other one is scheduled for in 2 weeks. So I have a busy end of the year. And with this, thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.